Hello, everybody, to all our freedom-loving people, as my co-host Ryan loves to say when we start these podcasts. It's Glenn Korn here, one of the co-hosts of Restricted Handling, and today we have a very special guest at a very important time. We have Monika Palotai, who is, I'm going to read her background if you give me a second. It's incredible background, and for all our followers, they should understand how significant it is that she took the time today. Given her background, I'm sure she's in high demand to talk to us about what's happening in Hungary and the elections there, and maybe go over some of the history and what the significance is of the different potential outcomes. So I want to, before I read your background, Monica, I just want to say hello, and again, thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Well, hello everyone from Budapest. I mean, it's really an honor to be on your podcast.
So Dr. Monika Palotai is a senior research fellow at the Religious Freedom Institute and a non-resident expert at the Warsaw Institute in Poland. Her primary focus of research and academic work is Russia and the CEE region, with a broader scope relationship between Russia, China, and Iran. Boy, is that timely right now.
So,
She previously worked as a visiting research fellow at the Hudson Institute at the Center for Religious Freedom and Center for American Common Culture, which must have been a fascinating place to work. She has a BA in Communications and Media from the Budapest Business School in Hungary and a JD from the Karoli Gaspar University of Reformed Church Hungary, and an MA degree in International Public Service at the University of Public Service Hungary. She has also continued her PhD studies in doctoral school at Public Administration Sciences as a Hungarian State Scholarship holder. Wow. Some credentials. Her expertise extends to geopolitics, EU law, international law, energy security, and in addition, she has written extensively on the war in Ukraine, drawing from her multiple visits to Ukraine since the full-scale invasion, which is something that we have in common. I always say it's always, I've been, I think, on my 13th trip, heading back again soon, and God bless you for making those trips. And then for our followers, we met at an event hosted by the Institute for World Politics, and we hit it off in our discussion about Ukraine and what's happening there. And our discussion today will have some implications for Ukraine, although I have some questions for our guest about what those implications may be depending on the results of the elections. And you can find Monica's work, her writing in Newsweek, Real Clear Defense, Real Clear Religion, Providence, The Spectator, National Interest, Washington Examiner, The Epoch Times, and The American Conservative. So we say in Arabic, mashallah. That's quite a record. And in addition to being an academic, she's also a accomplished equestrian and has competed in show jumping and endurance riding, which is also impressive, but not surprising given your Hungarian background and kind of the history of the people of
we
Hungary.
love horses. We love horses. There's a very long introduction, actually longer than I expected, but it's fine. Thank you so much for it, though. I appreciate it.
So thank you very much. You're calling in from Budapest.
I
The
am.
polls opened this morning there. Can you give us a sense of what the environment is like, what the feel is like right now during this historic day for elections for Hungary?
The city is really busy. I mean, I'm in Budapest, so that's very important to note. And mostly people usually go to vote at the afternoon. This is the trend. This has been the trend in the past couple of years or decades or so far. But anyhow, the city is really busy. So you can see that people are going to vote. And if you pass by or if you go to the polls, you can see that people are lining up. So you have to be patient. Some stations are really full and with hours of waiting time to cast your vote. So that's good. I'm really proud of the people we have, and it's historic. So we are at 74% now, which has never happened. It's blockbuster. So I'm really proud of the fellow citizens that they are going en masse to cast their votes.
I'm not sure that the U.S. has hit 74% voter turnout, maybe ever. I don't know. I mean, so that is very, very impressive
First
demonstration.
time for us as well. So you still have time to do that.
What do you think is motivating people? You think it's just people recognize how important the election is, or there's a lot of people doing advocacy and trying to get the vote out? What is your assessment on why such a historic turnout?
I think all are these, what you just mentioned, are truths. We don't know. We can't say, who who was more successful in mobilizing people, because by law cannot provide exit poll information. So you can't have any information till the polls close. So we don't know who was who was really successful, or maybe both. So, but yes, people on the Fidesz side, the governing party side, they realize that they need to vote because this is an existential, Tisza could be an existential threat for the governing party, Fidesz. And also for the Tisza voters, it is also existential. But we don't know who did better than the other, or maybe both did well. We don't know it yet. So, but yes, it's all true what you just mentioned.
And from what you're seeing, I mean, the polling is going smoothly. I know there's some concern that there could be violence or, people discouraged from voting, but so far what you're hearing and seeing, everything is going smoothly?
Well, so far, yes. I mean, you can read and you can hear that here and there some incidents, but so far nothing major or nothing major has surfaced. We will see if there are any incidents that are going to be submitted to the authorities that is going to be investigated later. But so far, it seems like it's all calm. And if you're asking about the aftermath that what happens after the close or when the results are out, I think both sides, or all sides rather, urging their voters to remain calm and definitely not inciting for any sorts of violence. So that has been a topic. It's a trending topic actually on both sides, that maybe the other party, maybe the other side is planning something. It seems like that what is trending, what I can see, and what the research engine shows, that everyone is trying to calm their own constituents down.
And in your experience, have you ever seen so much foreign interest in a Hungarian election?
Oh no, never. It's actually pretty awesome. I think, it's a small country, less than 10 million inhabitants. It's a landlocked country in the middle of Europe. I mean, it's the most beautiful country, I think, with the prettiest capital. Never seen that sort of an interest. Absolutely not. It's nice though, that whatever you do, whatever you Google, whatever you try to see on the internet, Hungary, 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 that pops up. Good or bad, but it's still there.
How do people respond? We just had the vice president of the United States there. We had President Trump call during a rally he was, involved in or, attending with Prime Minister Orban. How do people respond to that? Generally, is it positive? Is it people are annoyed the U.S. is so interested, or?
Well, it's interesting, most people, I would say, when I went to the market, or the gas station, they didn't really care, I would say. They were mainly complaining about the traffic and the road closures. So it was not really a major event. But this is my experience talking to people in an everyday life circumstances. But if you're talking to the political bubble or think tanks or so, that's a whole different picture. Just like everywhere else in the world, in Brussels or in Washington, D.C., no different here. So it was, first of all, it was in a sports stadium. This was a very alien setup to Hungarians. We are not used to that. It looked like most like the, I don't know, the Iowa caucus or something like that. It's not something that we are used to. So everyone was surprised in the policy world in Hungary that why it was held in a sports stadium. Now we know, or now we understand, I think. So yes, it seemed more like a very American style show, I would say, because it was a show. President Trump and Vice President JD Vance put on a show for the Hungarian audience, and it looked like the Iowa caucus. So I would say that was more like for the Hungarian or the Fidesz base, because they understand that sort of a setup, because they regularly go to the United States, they regularly participate in these sort of events. So I would say for them, it was amazing and it was something that they are used to. But for the average Hungarian, it was very, very unique, very something that they cannot really comprehend. So, and when I talk to Tisza voters, it is also something that, why was it necessary? They didn't really understand the message. It was more like, if you want to compare it to something, it's like Youngkin's message, fighting the war with yesterday message. So it was not really getting traction in the in the Tisza voters base.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's why I think it was more for like Orbán's or the Fidesz's base.
Right.
And that's why I think we could see, because we could see some polls after that the support for Fidesz dropped after Vice President JD Vance's visit. So I believe that was one of the reasons. One of them was the messaging, that it was too close to the election day, and the messaging was perhaps not really right or not really what concerned the voters. And it was a very alien, and it was also for the Fidesz base.
Can you help us understand? I mean, there's been, what's covered in the U.S. media, the Western media, very kind of black and white, in my opinion. You have, Viktor Orban and Fidesz, and then now you have Peter Magyar, and the Tisza Party, and there's almost this equation. Orban is connected with Putin, and now Trump and MAGA. And then you have Peter Magyar. He's a hero of Brussels and the EU, and he's, going to fix everything for Ukraine. Like, by the way, are there other players involved, like political parties in the elections that are important to watch? And then how would you describe to our audience, which is mainly American, although we do have, by the way, I am proud to say we have 2 followers in Hungary, which we are aware of. Of course, they're Americans, but that's okay. But how would you describe the election, like, and what's at stake in your assessment?
Well, obviously the future is at stake, or the next 4 years, I would say. But back to your question, or I hope I understand it right. So if you want to navigate in that seemingly chaotic setup, Vice President JD Vance put it right when he arrived. He said it's a moral fight. So what connects Orbán, Prime Minister Orbán, and the Fidesz party to the MAGA movement, maybe we can still say that. So to Trump, let's say that, or to Vice President JD Vance, is literally the moral fight. What Europe is facing at the moment, which is about migration, and it has been mentioned several times that Europe is really fighting for its culture, for its heritage, and Orbán has been fighting illegal entries or irregular entries, how we say it, or illegals, how you say it in the United States. So he put on a fight with Brussels. So that's one point. And this is where I see the connection. So it's a cultural war, you might want to say it, that Orbán has been fighting against Brussels. And Ukraine is a whole different issue. And Russia is, again, a whole different issue. So this is where I would put the Trump and the Vice President JD Vance's alignment. Now, how Magyar Péter, the opposition leader, comes into the picture and how it would change. Your main question is about Ukraine, right? Because you need to understand that the Hungarian society is mainly conservative, right? Very anti-immigration or illegal immigration, I would say. Just like Trump or JD Vance or mainly the whole GOP, right? So that aligns. And Magyar is no different from that. So he has said it several times that he's not going to change on the migration policies. So there's going to be an alignment. So in his manifesto, he stated that he's going to keep the southern, yes. So we are going to keep the fence, or Hungary would keep the fence. So there's not going to be change. And he voted against the migration pact as well. So the alignment stays there. And don't forget, Magyar comes from the Fidesz party, right? So he emerged 2 years ago. So he has the conservative roots as well. So, but when it comes to Ukraine, the Hungarian society, based on a last year, is very against Ukraine's accelerated accession. And Magyar Péter said it as well, that he is not supporting it and voted against it. So same applies to financial aid to Ukraine. The Hungarian society or citizens, they just don't support that. So, and Magyar Péter said the same thing when it comes to Ukraine, that it's not going to change. So I don't see if the Hungarian people believe that this is the right track when it comes to Ukraine.
So you were saying you're not sure that a victory for Tisza will be a huge change in Ukraine policy. Is that correct? Or
Yes, I
migration
would say.
policy?
No, I believe otherwise. I mean, I think there will not be a change because then Magyar Péter is going to lose the support from his base, right? So it's not going to happen. So the borders are not going to be open, and there's not going to be a change toward Ukraine either. And if you see the voting pattern in the EU, members, in the EU Parliament, they voted against the 90 billion loan as well for Ukraine. So I don't really see a change. There could be, I mean, I don't want to really answer hypothetical question or hypothetical scenarios, but based on what he says and based on how he voted, I don't see much change. Plus, taking account into the majority of opinion in Hungary toward Ukraine, Magyar Péter wouldn't really have a huge room to maneuver when it comes to Ukraine.
So this sense that, a victory for Magyar Peter would be a victory for support for Ukraine is a little bit misplaced, you think?
No, he's pro-sovereignty. I don't really understand. I mean, living in Washington, D.C., of course, I do understand, when you say you're pro-Ukraine. However, I don't really agree with that. I think you have to be pro your country. So pro-United States, pro-Hungary, and Ukrainians should be pro-Ukraine, right? So I don't think you can expect a country to act contrary to your own interest, be it the United States, be it Hungary, or be it Ukraine. Obviously, Ukrainians have to act, in their own interest, whatever it might be. And Hungary has to act in its own interest, just like the United States. So I would say, just like Orbán Viktor or the Fidesz Party, they are pro-sovereignty. They say that they act in order to pursue Hungary's interest. This is the same thing what Magyar Péter says. So I don't really see a different approach here.
So let's talk about U.S. Hungarian relations. If Magyar Peter wins, what do you see a big change there? I mean, because the perception is that the Trump administration was trying to throw its weight behind the Orban candidacy. Some people have said that could backfire if the opposition wins. What do you think? What's your assessment? And what you see here in Washington, do you think that the establishment here is ready to deal with the opposition if they win?
Would they have any other choice? There's no really another choice. They can ignore or however they wish, treat the situation. But if the United States is seeking a cultural alignment and an alliance in Europe, then the United States, President Trump or whoever, must understand that seemingly, or it seems like, based on the manifestos or based on what Magyar Péter says, that it seems like it might change. It might be a campaign slogan, and he might change. We don't know yet, right? So I believe, but I don't know. It's hypothetical. I think they should, or Magyar Péter should align himself more or emphasize more on what he believes in, if he truly believes what he says. But we don't know yet because we are in still, this is election day and we've already seen the campaign. And we all know that campaign slogans sometimes don't manifest
Right.
after election day.
Right. What are the Hungarian people looking for from the United States? What is the expectation of the relationship with the United States for most Hungarians that you speak with?
So when Hungarian people in general, there is a certain resentment for sure among Hungarian people and especially among the Tisza voters. If you read, and based on my experience again and comments, but you can read on social media under Tisza voters or so on posts that they don't really trust the Trump administration. So I'm not sure how that would play out. But when it comes to the Fidesz, they are absolutely in full support of the Trump administration and the United States. So we will see which party is going to emerge or going to win the elections, and then we can answer that question. But
Right.
so far, nobody is against the United States so far. However, if you see a broader EU picture and me traveling around the European Union and talking to politicians, and the closer to get to Brussels, the resentment is getting higher and higher and bigger and just weird. So I remember that when Trump was elected, most European countries and EU member states, they didn't have plan B for that. They expected Kamala to be the president. So they had
Hmm.
absolutely zero idea how to handle Trump. So, and I guess, this is still the situation. They still don't understand it. Most of the people don't understand, or most of the countries, most of the leaders, they still don't understand it.
Right. That's a very interesting observation, which I agree with 1,000%. I think, I say when people talk about this strained relationship now between Brussels and Washington, I would try to remind my European friends, you bet on the wrong horse. You are counting on a victory of, Kamala Harris, and she didn't win, and you didn't seem to have a plan B. And it's almost like you were in denial. And the American people elected Donald Trump to come back to office, and you should have probably been better prepared and understand that, this is just my own assessment, but President Trump didn't come from Washington. He's not from so you spend a lot of time with think tanks. You've spent a lot of time, in Washington. I've spent a lot of time, well, luckily not too much time, but in my career, after my career, when I retired, I spent time here and with think tanks, and there's almost one mindset, and he's completely from outside that intellectual approach to things. And it shocks so many people. I hope, by the way, when we look at Hungary, this is what's so interesting to me too, because we talk about Europe, but sometimes we get focused on certain countries in Europe. And
Mhm.
people ask all the time, our relationship with Europe. Actually, we have very good relations with a lot of countries in NATO and Europe. They're just shifting. And it's not what it was maybe 10 years ago. But, I always use the example of Turkey when we talk about NATO. Our relationship with Turkey has improved, major NATO ally, but, Turkey itself has had hard but tough relations with Brussels and other countries, let's say, I don't know, what did Donald Rumsfeld call it, old Europe and new Europe.
Mhm.
So anyway, so going back to the elections now, what are the key issues for the Hungarian people? Because you're saying that there's two leading candidates that are very similar in conservative outlook. Well, I've read that it's the economy. What are the key issues that you're seeing that are, on the minds of voters as they go to the polls?
Well, one of them is the war, the war, because it is in our neighborhood, right? So this is one of the issues. And the other one is economy, yes, and corruption issues as an attached extra to it. So these are the main things. But on the most issues, it seemingly, again, because you can base your assessment on what you read, because we don't have experience from one side, right? So these are the key issues. And obviously what is happening globally now in terms of energy and gas supplies and oil supplies, it doesn't make the situation better. So the economy is not expected, or the energy security situation is just going to get trickier for Hungary, because it's a landlocked country. So to get our energy, it's not that easy, that for most, that you ship it by sea. It's just not possible. And the pipelines are not made out of Legos, right? You just cannot pick them up, and assemble somewhere else. So it takes effort and time to plan otherwise, and make sure to not fall from one dependency to another dependency, and make sure you have a diverse sourcing enough that you secure your energy for the country. So this is one of the major issues that influenced the current situation, for sure, and the situation where we are at the moment. So yes, economy is a huge thing. At what the candidate of the Tisza Party mentions often is corruption and the war. So it's two main things that are being mentioned.
Right. And going to the war, my understanding is that when Russia expanded its invasion of Ukraine, that Orban was supportive of Ukraine and its sovereignty, and they, critical of Moscow for expanding its aggression. And I guess in 2014, Hungary was also against Russia's annexation of Crimea. So he's often portrayed in the West as being pro-Putin and pro-Moscow. How would you just explain to our viewers what you see? Is that the case, or is that a little bit of a simplistic argument that people make?
I think it's very simplistic. I mean, having been to Ukraine 10 plus, 15 plus times since the full scale invasion started and talking to people there, and 4 years into that chaos there and into the war, um, I would definitely say, yes, you're absolutely right. He supported Ukraine at first. But don't forget it that he has 16 years of experience on in global politics, right? That also means that he knows how to handle Brussels and he understands that possibly what the next step is going to be. So we are making fun of on social media of Ursula von der Leyen that monitoring the situation or just talking, but this is clearly what has happened. Right? In the last 4 years, the European Union and the member states mainly monitored the situation, and it was virtue signaling mainly. So I'm to be honest, I am really pissed because 4 years into that war, we are still saying as long as it takes. I don't think it's a right approach personally. It should not be like this. It should have been over a long time. And what Orban Viktor saw most probably, perhaps, I don't know, a few months into the war, that there's no exit strategy. There's no plan because as long as it takes, it's not a plan. It's an infinite. It's a never-ending war. It could be a never-ending war, and you guys have experience with that. So it could be easily 20 years, and we can say it's been going on for that long if we count from Crimea and from the Donbass. So it is a never-ending war, and there's no exit strategy. And the European Union, if you go back in time, when Trump was elected, they changed their rhetorics, right? Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, and all of them. That suddenly they are looking for some sort of peace negotiations or some sort of a way to have peace. But they are still unwilling to negotiate with the Russians, right? So how can you have peace agreement or how could you have peace if you don't negotiate with the other party?
Right,
So I think this is what Orban has seen. This is my personal opinion. And he changed it pro peace. Because, now 4 years into the war, again, this is my personal opinion. I don't think that the war can be ended on the battlefield. If it could have been, it would have been over by now. We are 4 years
right,
into that. It's not going to be over on the battlefield,
right,
but it has to be an end. And having been to Ukraine, I know how people feel there. I know how it is in Odessa or Sumy or other part of the countries. I haven't only been to Kiev, where you're safe under an umbrella. Not that anymore as it used to be, but it's still safer than any other parts of the country. People had enough. When you're under constant bombardment and you're still doing your daily routine and you're tired as hell, you wake up every morning and you know that you're not going to sleep and it's going on for 4 years and you're frozen at winter because it was a horrible winter in Ukraine. You know that it was most of the time there was no heating. They had enough as well. And the end is nowhere near.
right,
So I think this is where Orban was right. So credit is
right,
given where credit is due. And based on his experience, I think he saw that coming and he was right. The only thing, as JD Vance, Vice President JD Vance says it, I think the question is not anymore whether there is a need for peace, but the question is how do we achieve that peace? How do we put those
right,
two sides at the table to negotiate a lasting, or at least for a while, lasting peace till we figure out the rest?
right. Yeah. So on the issue of Ukraine too, I think it's important for our listeners, our followers, to understand that there's history between Ukraine and Hungary that goes before 2014, outside of the conflict, that there's a Hungarian minority in Ukraine. Can you talk about a little bit about this? I know that there's been some tensions that are, they're separate of the war and maybe different views on how to end the war. But I don't think most Americans understand that there is a ethnic minority in Ukraine that was left there at the end of the First World War and the way that Europe was divided. Can you talk a little bit about that and the status of those tensions now?
Yeah, in Transcarpathia, there is a substantial amount of ethnic Hungarians left over there, or still living there. However, they mainly moved to Hungary throughout, these past 4 years. There are still, and yes, tensions still exist because the use of national symbols, the use of language, the education has always been an issue between the two countries. So it's a never-ending story, and it's a very sad story, by the way. And we had several incidents in Transcarpathia where Ukrainian authorities, I would say, I'm trying to be a little bit more diplomatic, but yes, they didn't really appreciate, the Hungarian culture, or they didn't really want to approve it or support it. I mean, I do understand partially you're in Ukraine, learn the language, so on and so forth, but they are still Hungarians. This is their culture. So yes, there is a tension, and it's not new. It has always been there. So the status now, it's unchanged because Ukraine tried to modify based on what Hungary has, but it's still not there where the Hungarian minorities would like to be. And those minorities, they are really, I don't want to use the term pro-Hungary, but they are Hungarian. So they really want to embrace their culture, their language. So, and the
Right.
Ukrainian part should understand that. So this
Do you
is
know
the status of
generally, like, what is the number? Is it a couple of 100,000,
the moment.
500,000?
I'm
How
not
many?
sure. The moment I'm not sure what the exact number is because a lot of them moved back to Hungary because of the war. So last time I was in Ukraine and I traveled around the region, literally most of them work here. They have got both passports, so they can work in Hungary. They speak the language. So a lot of them moved here. If they are willing to go back, as far as I know, I have lots of friends, working here or moved here. They all planning to go back. So we don't know the exact numbers yet at this
And
point.
Hungary has taken a number of Ukrainian refugees, correct, since the start of the expanded invasion. I think it's one of the countries where many Ukrainians have moved to for
Yes, I mean, we are
shelter.
bordering country. So everybody try to help the Ukrainian refugees. It has never been an issue. Nobody has bothered them. Everybody tried to help, the escaping families. I mean, everybody understood it's a war. Most of the people understood it's a war, and they were really attacked. We are talking about families, right? Women with children. It's not like the Syrian refugee crisis, after Merkel in 2015, when mainly men came over. It's just a completely different situation. And it's a neighboring country, and you try to help. Yes. So Hungary took in a lot of people. There is a Ukrainian language school as well. So that was opened, I think, last year, where children can learn in Ukrainian, their own culture, their own teachers, language. So I think it's really supportive. And, most of the European countries cut back on aid for Ukrainian refugees, but Hungary is still very supportive. Nobody is talking about it. It's not like somebody's bothering them. It's a very welcoming country.
Right. And going back to the EU, what if Orban wins tonight or today, is there any path to like a easing of tensions with the rest of the EU or the majority of the EU countries? How do you see that playing out? And then, of course, the second question is, or additional question, that if Magyar Peter wins or his party wins, do you see that it's going to, because I think he's saying he's going to improve relations with the EU. Is that possible if he continues the policies that you're saying, including, controlling migration, which I think many other EU countries have been against or critical of Hungary? What do you see? How do you see that playing out?
Well, Migration is a very interesting topic because the EU is changing. I mean, a lot of, not the EU, I'm sorry, member states' stance on migration is changing, regardless what the EU does or doesn't do. So that's, if Orban loses, that's technically one of his tragedies, I believe, because he was the only one, Orban was the only one with Poland who tried to put a stop on the Angela Merkel-led disaster and the Ursula von der Leyen continued disaster, or of Pedro Sanchez in Spain. So he started all these that illegal migration must be stopped and fences and so on and so forth. So, and most of the European Union member states are following it now because they can see the results and the consequences of that failed migration policy. So Sweden, let it be Sweden. Germany is changing on migration. And even in the migration pact, it's still a disaster because you have to, if you don't take migrants into your country, you have to pay, right? This is not really a fair solution. But anyway, at least there are so-called hubs where you can enter the illegal enters to the EU, but not let them in till their application is processed, which is most probably not, and they can be deported to third countries or wherever whatever the agreement is. Lots of other countries are seeking, new approaches, how remigration or deportation can be done. So on immigration, it's done. It's remigration, deportation, and there's a stop. Most probably the only exemption is Spain, which is not really on this track. But all the other countries are changing very much. So if Orban is going to stay as a prime minister of Hungary, I think nothing is going to change. If you mention like the relationship with the European Union, I don't think it will change, and I don't think it should change, because the European Union, look at the Mercosur deal, right? So it's expanding beyond its territory, and it's really taking away country's sovereignty. And again, the Orban government is a very pro-sovereignty government. So it's not going to let the Commission expand more or interfere more with issues that belongs to the country's sovereign decision. So I think he's going to remain on the same path. Moreover, when it comes to the EU funds, I'm sure he's going to try to do everything to get those EU funds. And also he needs those EU funds. But President Trump just recently tweeted that he is going to put all the financial might the United States can provide to Hungary if and when Orbán Viktor is reelected. So that can also be sorted, and jointly, President Trump and Viktor Orbán, I'm sure that there is a way and there are means to make sure that perhaps Hungary get those funds or deepen the alignments in order to get those funds. So the other part, if Tisza's Péter Magyar would win the elections tonight or tomorrow morning, we'll see when we are going to know the results, he's going to be in a trickier situation. And I would go back to your earlier question, right, that how his relationship is going to be with Washington, D.C. Because if Viktor Orbán is going to get all the financial might from President Trump, whether Péter Magyar is going to get the same treatment, yet to be seen, whether he wins or whether, Trump is a businessman. So we don't know what his reaction would be or how he would treat it. So
Right.
if he wins, if Magyar Péter wins, he would be in a very tricky situation, right? Because he would need the funds from the European Union. So I believe he would need to make some sort of a deal, but it would be again contrary to what the Hungarian people want. Because if the deal would be, let's say, and it's very hypothetical, that Hungary should approve the 90 billion for Ukraine, Hungary doesn't really support it, right? The Hungarian people. Same applies to the accelerated accession. And Magyar Péter said that several times, that if and when it comes to this, then it's going to be up to the Hungarian people to decide. So he would be in a very tricky situation because he needs the funds. He would need to make a deal. So I'm not sure how he would be able to amend the situation with Brussels, with Ursula von der Leyen. Member states are different. I believe, single issue cooperations with different member states are absolutely possible. And the world is leaning toward that direction. So it's
Right.
still yet to be seen, but he would be definitely in a trickier situation.
And shifting regions, but the war in Iran. What is the perspective from Budapest on the war itself? The fact that we initiated this large-scale military operation. Now we have a ceasefire, but it looks like the ceasefire is very tenuous, and the initial round of negotiations didn't produce any agreement, which is no surprise. How do the Hungarian people look at this, and how do they feel about like the U.S. and Israel basically going to war with Iran?
It's very far from here. The gas is getting expensive. There is a price cap, with Hungarian license plate. You can fill up your car, cheaper other than, if you have the foreign license plate. So it's very far. And today is election day. And it was a heated, debates, and everything was leading toward, today's, no, people don't really care about it. Whether Hormuz is closed or not, or who can close it better, whether, the supreme leader of Iran or Trump can close it with a blockade. It's very far. It's not really important for the Hungarian people. Absolutely. When I talk to people, when I go to the market or at the gas station, some people don't even know about it. The only thing they noticed really is that gas is getting expensive. Same in the United States. It all comes back to bread and butter at the end of the day. And that's all
Right.
that matters. Over there, gas and eggs, we have gas and bread. But the same thing.
Right. Okay. So basically, it's a secondary issue. It's not a big issue for the average Hungarian.
I don't think it's even secondary. It's somewhere there down the line.
One of the things that the war has kind of, I would say, exaggerated a little bit or exposed a little bit more is this friction between Washington and some of the key NATO allies. And there's a lot of hysteria, I would say. The United States is leaving NATO. It's the end of NATO. Of course, President Trump has made some comments which have encouraged that, which I personally believe he's just venting, but I don't think we're leaving NATO. It's my personal view. But how do Hungarians look at that? Are they concerned that the U.S. is going to walk away from Europe or the U.S. is going to leave NATO? Would they like to see the U.S. leave NATO, or is Hungary want to leave NATO? What's your assessment there?
It's again, among the people, it's not really a topic. It's more important at the moment, like literally the most important thing. When we wake up tomorrow morning in Budapest, in Hungary, what is going to happen? How much the gas is going to be and how much the bread is going to be. So whether NATO or not, I mean, when we are talking about cities, yes, you can talk about NATO as long as you want. Yet it's not even a secondary topic at the moment. But this is momentarily. When we are going to pass the election day and the election fever, I'm sure all these topics are going to come back to the conversation. But at the moment, it's not really important. Absolutely not.
My only last question for you is, can you tell our audience something special about Hungarian culture?
Oh my gosh. I'm still thinking about, what questions so there might be that would be important about the Hungarian elections. I think, Americans should understand that it seems like that it's important for the United States because of the White House, right? Because of JD Vance, Rubio, and Trump. But it's unbelievably important for people. Back to your first question. And I really want to emphasize on that it's unbelievably important for the Hungarian people for different reasons, in both camps or, in both parties. But I've never seen, and the turnout shows that as well. And I don't think it's only mobilization, but it's really people. It shows that it's important for people that they want to decide about their future, whether this way or that way. It doesn't really matter. But we have never seen that. And when I'm saying that NATO and Iran and all that, it's not important. And what you see with JD's visit, Vice President JD Vance's visit, that the popularity of Fidesz dropped. And he addressed, family issues and gender issues and cultural issues. So when you add all these, it comes back again that Hungary is important. once again, for the Hungarian people, regardless of what other countries and other people think, but again, for different reasons. And I've never seen that before. So we can talk about, interference or influence or whatever. I don't think it was, or it is, or it doesn't matter, because Hungarian people already decided, as we can see, that they're going to vote. Which way, it doesn't matter, but they already decided that it's important for them. So, and I think this is important to do. It has never happened before.
Issues of sovereignty, issues of national values, protecting Hungarian law from outside influences. Those are the issues that are, and of course, the economy, which is not natural in any election. But my sense is just protecting the cultural value of the.
It's really important. Trust me, it's really important for us Hungarians. I mean, when you travel all across in Europe and you see what is going on, my son, my older son, studies in the Netherlands. And most Hungarians, not even them, they don't want to go down that road. We don't want to go down on the Brusselian road, where you just don't hear your own language. Your own culture and heritage is not important anymore. And this is important for Hungarians. Hungarians want to decide about their own future. And I believe this is partially the reason why JD, after the vice president visit, the popularity dropped. People just want to decide. Either way, it's important for Hungarians.
Do you have a prediction on the election, or do you not? You want to avoid making a prediction?
We are so close to the results. Yes, I do want to avoid it. Honestly, I
Okay.
don't know. Honestly, I mean, to be really fair, I have really no idea. What we can see is the participation. To predict results from participation, I think it's really impossible. It's really impossible because we don't know who mobilized who. That's just not possible. It's a historic election for a lot of reasons. 16, it either ends, Orban 16 years, and there's going to be a whole new chapter with a person who has absolutely zero experience, right, in global politics in a very, very, very chaotic world, or everything goes on the same way, but there are going to be changes. We would be very silly or actually stupid to think if Orban stays in government and he's going to remain the prime minister, that nothing is going to change. There are going to be changes. There have to be changes because people will demand it. So either way, there are going to be changes. So Orban has to change, domestic policies and approaches.
Again, thank you so much for taking the time on a very historic day. I agree with you. The turnout is very, very impressive. When we talk about democracy, participation is key. Maybe Americans in our next elections will take a lesson. Although I think we did pretty well during the last election. There was a big turnout, but we could always do better. And we'll see the results. And, hopefully whoever wins, the other side will accept the results, and there'll be no violence. And Hungary can get on doing its business, and then maybe we can talk in a couple of months again. Because one of the things we really didn't get into, but I'd love to talk about how you see, how to resolve the war in Ukraine. Because I agree with you, you can't keep fighting this war forever. The Ukrainians can't keep fighting. It's not healthy for a number of reasons. And some people say, like, there are a lot of people that they're ready to fight to the last Ukrainian. But I don't think the Ukrainians want that.
No, they don't. You know that just like as I do, that they don't want it.
Right. And so how you get to the result, I agree with Vice President Vance. Okay, the question is like, how do we get the sides to agree? What I've seen is that the Ukrainians already, it's the Russians that are the problem. It's Putin that's the problem. And so, if you put it all on the table, the Russians have been pushing back and making maximalist demands, kind of like the Iranians are. And, in the Iran example, it led to a major conflict. With Russia, there's got to be another solution, in my opinion, which maybe we can do another podcast and talk about that, given your expertise and your
It's a
travel
very
to Ukraine
interesting
and your.
question. We've been talking about it a lot, and honestly, it's a very tricky situation. Personally, I believe none of the parties are ready to finish the war. Neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians, whoever says whatever. Some says the Ukrainians ready. I don't think they are ready. And there are numerous reasons for that. I think, it's I believe it's partially Europeans' fault, Biden's fault, whoever you would say that. But I believe that Zelensky or his administration or his government is pretty used to that role that he is in. And I think people usually in his position or in similar position have difficulties to get rid of or give up that position. So you can call it ego, you can call it something else as well. Try to be diplomatic, but I don't think he's ready to give up his presidency for a lot of reasons,
Right.
I think.
Okay.
And giving up like territorial concessions would definitely come with giving up his presidency.
Right.
But
Right.
yes, I don't want to get into it because it's a very long discussion and we both have experience on the ground as well. But it's worth a discussion, definitely, for sure.
Future podcast, if you agree.
Let's do that. Sure. Absolutely. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you again. By the way, what's your son's name? Can we ask on the podcast? Whatever is his name. Hopefully he's having a good time in the Netherlands right now.
No, he's in Budapest. Actually, he came back to Budapest to vote. So both of my children are here now. So the older one is 22. So he arrived a couple of days ago to make sure that he can cast his vote. So he's here with
Amazing.
his friends. They have already took all the grandparents and it was actually a family event. So for us, it's really important, to participate and we encourage everyone, regardless, who you vote for, it doesn't matter, but it's your civic duty, I believe, to vote and express your opinion and never give up. And this is your way to say your opinion. And it's really important and they have to get used to it. So even my little one, he's 16. He lives with me in the United States and he's back here because he's also going with the group just to see how that goes. However, he can't vote. But he's very opinionated and he has an opinion, obviously, about everything.
And it must be in alignment with his mother's or else. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Okay. Well, again, congratulations to the people of Hungary on their election today. And we're all anxious to see the results.
Thanks for listening and being a part of the RH community. Would you like to receive the same daily intel brief that Glenn and I read? You can get it at restrictedhandling.com. We've curated what we consider to be the most relevant and reputable sources on all things international security, geopolitics, military and intel ops, and economics and sanctions, focused exclusively on Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and the Middle East, to include accompanying podcasts for Russia, China, economics, and spy stories. Just head to restrictedhandling.com, enter your email, and you'll get the daily briefs that Glenn and I both read, and you can leave comments and questions that we can respond to. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe.